Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we got the big list, the top 50 songs of 2015. Because we're on the list, it's always the hardest for me to make, mostly because it requires by far the most work. The best songs of the year overall. Not just the hits, but singles and deep cuts from albums ranging from wildly successful to barely even out of the underground. And this year, it was a lot harder than most, mostly because it was a damn great year for music. The charts may have been strong, but that was nothing compared to the cavalcade of great songs we got, which meant cutting this list down from thousands to around 630, down to 165, down to the 50 we have, meant that there were a lot of painful cuts. So much so that I seriously considered instituting a one song per album rule. But in the end, I'm sorry, I couldn't do it, because there were some records that were so unbelievably good that I had to include multiple entries from them. Now we'll be covering those albums in greater detail a bit later this week, but in the end, I held to the rule that at most I could put up to 3 songs from any one album on this list. And that we easily had more of those than usual makes my argument that this was a damn solid year for music. Probably better than last year, all the more powerful. Now one thing before we start. While I can describe music pretty well, and while it works for me on a technical level, most songs on this list cut a fair bit deeper than that, and thus I'm going to be endeavoring to provide more emotional context as to why they worked so well for me beyond a purely intellectual exercise. And of course, it's my picks. There might be some common overlap between my choices and those of other critics, but it would be disingenuous to choose tracks for cultural importance when I can't define that, rather than what really got me more deeply, what actually built an emotional connection. So let's start off with a track that completely threw me off guard because it was awesome. You know, I was expecting it like Baroness's comeback release Purple, but I wasn't expecting it to hit me like the way it did, mirroring the explosive metal flavor of their earliest releases to the intricate melodies of Yellow and Green, and no song got that better than Shock Me. We started off with shimmering synthesizers you'd hear from the mid-80s maybe, before breaking to the anthemic crunch of killer progressive sludge metal. And what intensifies that explosion is how my surprise at this song kicking all amounts of ass is mirrored in the lyrics, as the narrator sees his own success flipped out from beneath his feet, the shock to his system that he so desperately needed. Help with how David Friedman's warping synth production swallows up the cacophonous bridge until the triumphant guitar solo roars free. It might be the latest entry onto this list, but my god, it definitely earns it. I did not expect this to creep up on me the way it did. The finale track on Steven Wilson's gorgeously tragic solo album, it takes the form of a letter written to the narrator's brother, penned against the piano and acoustic guitar-touched storm. It strips the poetry down to pure prose, seeking a desperate connection to a family member lost as time has slipped away. It's a cry for help matched in simple, aching language, and yet as the liquid smooth electric guitars and the gorgeously subtle swells of strings come in against the piano, you realize that it's a letter that was never sent. It's the tragedy of being forgotten, translated perhaps better than any other song this year. The one that cuts all the deeper when you wonder beyond my videos or my short stories or my newly published novel this year, what will actually end up being remembered. Something to think about.
Having a record year.
Of course, you're also going to get those songs that show the narrator retreating inwards and finding something very much worthwhile and coming out all the stronger. Eric Church turned around for me in a big way with the surprise album Mr. Misunderstood this year, and songs like Record Year are the reason why. This is a guy finding relief from heartbreak and a stack of vinyl and long-forgotten art and plenty of booze, beginning with a loop over organ swell, and yet it's not one that's always pretty and shows how it's not the only thing that art you need to find that true relief in the end. And yet, even with that, the needle drags over a rattled bass line, layers of guitar, and I found myself living my own record year this year with Eric Church. If only for pure music nerd symmetry, this song manages to get it, and it's on this list.
Shiny things, but we always made it work. Building castles out of dirt. My heart
MisterWives made their stab at indie pop exuberance, I was expecting the record to wear on me pretty quickly. And yet, stripping away the technicolor to faded strings and liquid guitars, the band found something more grounded and explosive than the majority of that debut album. Mandy Lee Duffy pulls back into something more soulful as she sings from the frigid shithole of the dive bar, admitting the ragged truth behind their genesis as a band into an anthem for their borough of New York City that feels authentic and real. Now don't get me wrong, I love tracks like Reflections and Not Your Way, but this touches something with more texture that can speak to anybody clawing themselves out of a rougher part of a city, most cause it feels real.
I've been sifting through these remains for years, bitter tears, bitter pills. Oh, it sucks when there's nothing but gold in those hills. Girl, I know what you're going through. I'm going there too.
Now, one thing I know about myself is that I love music made about the creative process, and it definitely is going to be reflected in my list of my favorite albums, spoiler alert. And as such, Girl in the Sling, it was going to make this list. As always, Dan Behar's beautifully poignant lyrics have real resonant power, as on the surface, he tries to extend some sympathy to an alienated girl looking out over commercial emptiness, all over an empty piano and strings touch mixed with that gorgeous horns interlude. But, of course, it's Dan Behar, it runs deeper than that. This is him looking out into the flickering eyes of his muse, contemplating his recent run at success and the emptiness he feels yawning at his feet as she sways on her feet, as he could step towards greater success at the cost of his heart, and she knows it. He knows what his muse is going through, and he's going through it too. It's so achingly simple, and yet cuts so deeply every single time, with one of the most poignant strings outros that you'll hear all year. Not always an easy song to revisit, but definitely always worth it.
I came here to raise hell, I can't lie. One shot, one kill, it's real, I aim high. Don't shoot one shot if you ain't ready to die. Never get it fucked up, I got shooters for hire. Cause you don't want it, I have you like I. Better back the fuck up, you're done so I try. Now that weak shit will never slide, I despise. You are now not in the presence of nice guys.
You know, it's funny how the best moment on Dr. Dre's Compton only features him on production, and yet the hyper-stylized and riveting explosion that was that album, this was the most powerful moment, where Anderson .Paak is saved from death in the water by a figure that the roiling guitar riffs break into a killer bass groove paints as a reincarnated anti-hero. And while I'd be remiss not to highlight John Connor's delirious hook and yet meticulously constructed verse, which is just excellent, this is a track where Snoop Dogg delivers his best performance in decades, showing just why his career has lasted with a sort of ruthlessly violent charisma I didn't even know he was capable of delivering anymore. It's pure careening gangsta momentum, and almost enough to justify Compton's existence on its own. If that's not saying something, I don't know what is, because this song is awesome.
Feel the charge of the good things you run to. But I only hear the rattlesnake winds they blow dust and I'm helpless to fight back.
You know, the funny thing about Everytime Boots is how it's easily the most rollicking and bouncy song that Julia Holter has ever made, with the skittering piano lines, the bubbly drum and bass line, and ebbing swells of strings that plays borderline comedic with its tone. And yet, with the wispy hints of snakes on the bridge that build into a fantastic crescendo, this is Julia Holter taking her firm stand for equal ground against the dusty winds that would push her back or lock her into motorcycle riding orbit around her man. This song has a great exasperated quality to it that I really love, just craving the same sort of adulation that she's expected to give her partner. And while it's never clear if she actually gets it here, it shows that she's more than capable of rising above Western pinup to Easy Rider, just on her own.
We still gangbang anyway. Fix that. Though we still gangbang anyway.
Though we still gangbang anyway. Though we still gangbang anyway.
Though we still gangbang anyway.
You know, I was probably one of the harshest critics of the game's double release this year of the Documentary 2 and the Documentary 2.5. But that didn't mean there weren't gang-related songs that cut me deep to the core all the same. And this boundary-crossing song with Bloods, The Game, and J-Rock on verses and Crip Schoolboy Q on the hook and leading out the song, the best possible example. And what's chilling is how simple it is. A bleak piano line against a dirty beat that builds to thunderous darkness on the hook, and then Schoolboy Q and J-Rock spraying rounds against a scene of frightening normality, undercutting any glorification with references to Crip crippling injury and hearses and dead loved ones. But the game is the one who takes the song into far more powerful and dark territory, hitting the sketchy politics and the systemic racism that lies at the roots of the gangs and the misunderstanding that sparked that war. The final lines are particularly chilling. They know the history and that this shit could end any day, showing that Crips and Bloods could step away and end this contrived war, but as Schoolboy Q spits on the hook, they'll still gang bang anyway, because the only thing that they know. The history, the well-structured and nuanced rhymes, the bombastic yet haunting production, this is gangster rap at its absolute finest, and if the game may have made some uneven albums this year, this song was worth it all the same.
Empty bottles on the table, black roses on the ground, silhouettes of people dancing into an unfamiliar sound. Hello stranger, can I call you a friend? My friend, I'm going down. With empty bottles on the table, black roses on the ground.
If the violence of the last song was focused outward with no endpoint in sight, Empty Bottles flips it inward to focus on Yelawolf's alcoholism, and it doesn't pull any punches. The brittle acoustic strums against the deeper guitar tone against the menacing beat is a song that evokes the image of chintzy jive bars filled with desperate poverty and drunks alone in their own self-loathing misery, especially as that piano comes in to augment the melody. And with the tempo shift on the bridge punctuated by gunshots, the creeping feeling of inevitability that underscores this track is genuinely haunting. As for why it's on this list, well, there are things that I've seen this year, and there are things you talk about, and things you don't.
I got a crazy heart, but I was born to lose it. Married to a dream with a mistress named Music.
So now to pivot over to something that's a lot brighter. If record year was Eric Church finding his inner music nerd, Mistress Named Music was him letting it run free in a way that hits me far more effectively than any of the overwrought explosions of The Outsiders. Sure enough in itself to drench it in fantastically textured acoustic guitars, sparse percussion, piano and organ swelling beneath it, tracing Eric Church's evolution from Hellraiser to something more responsible, and yet that dream and that Mistress Named Music never left him all the way. Going with one of the best crescendos you'll hear all year that kicks from skittering snares and cymbals into an electric soul. It's so much more rock star wish fulfillment all the same, but this time it earns it by soaking the song in soul and gospel, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
You thought God was an architect, now you know he's something like a pipe bomb ready to blow. And everything you built, it's all for show, goes up in flames in 24 frames.
So one of the key elements that underscores Jason Isbell's absolutely incredible album, Something More Than Free, is the role of the observer, placing them with necessary distance in order to move on with your own life. And 24 frames casts this in impressively sharp focus, showing every step the narrator must take to move past a messy divorce that subtly provides a critique for that observer as well, and one that's all the more brutal. How that detachment can be just as harsh, especially with the biggest observer at all, having been the one to light the pipe bombs going off in slow motion. You know, the man upstairs. And what's kind of amazing is how unassuming the song commits to that detachment, with Dave Cobb's subtle work in emphasizing the bass beneath the acoustic groove, and Jason Isbell's very tense delivery working wonders against that instantly memorable guitar melody. And if you've ever had a reckless moment where you're watching things collapse around you as you just try to detach, put this on. Trust me on that.
And when she's not, she's angry, and somehow I'm to blame. Don't know if I can hang in such a complicated game, but she loves me. She loves me.
You know, it seems like there's a pattern that I notice with anyone who really gets into James McMurtry. They spend a few weeks trying to figure out what the hell he really means with his intricate lyrics and songs, and then spends the rest of the time raving about how he's one of the best songwriters near independent country. And She Loves Me is no exception to that rule. For an album loaded with explorations of maturity, this song is an impressively modern and stunningly articulated picture of an open relationship, where James McMurtry goes out on tour and his partner hooks up with somebody else. And while he's none too sure how well it'll work out, or if he's remotely comfortable with it against a gentle acoustic rollick and understated piano that transitions into borderline doo-wop after a great low-end solo, the song ends with her indeed coming back, because she does indeed love him. And you know, for as much as this feels like a Dan Savage wet dream come true, there's something so refreshingly straightforward and candid about the airport novella kind of trashy nature of it all that really did stick with me, proving once again one of the best songwriters in the industry could pull this off.
run the game, got the whole world talking. King Kunta, everybody wanna cut the legs off him. King Kunta, black man taking no losses. Oh yeah, bitch, where you and I was walking. Now I run the game, got the whole world talking. King Kunta, everybody wanna cut the legs off him. When you got the yams.
Of course, if we're looking for songwriters that everybody else would recognize, you got the closest thing to this list of a hit with King Kunta. The rise of a bass line made of liquidified funk into kooky female vocals, and the guitar line that anchored that killer West Coast bounce. And Kendrick Lamar is just on fire on this song. A brag track that shows him on top, but with the knives coming ever closer to his throat, with all the vices loaded to bring him down, just like they did with other icons like Bill Clinton, Richard Pryor, and Michael Jackson himself. And after this, it all ends with a guitar solo that reminds me more than a little bit of Stankonia era Outkast, because why the hell not? It's a song that walks the tightrope between ego and those brought down by it. And on a year where I've had more success with this channel than ever before, I think I definitely needed that message, for better or for worse.
By lightning, with a hand in the sand. Came to with a fist fused in glass. Closed the circuit, skull full of white light. Mouth full of ash, sparks in the pavement, dragging the chain. Anchors off, man, lost it again. Steady on, gotta push through the rain. Weather in the vein, came for this, trained for this. Fuck, made for this, pray they miss duck. Duck, gray duck gets up and running. Rest fall back like a bridge in London. Brand new brakes, I never touch.
And yet on the other hand, if you want a track that's a classic example of all complicated bars piling up against a huge glitchy melody, skittering hi-hats, and anthemic vocals in a hook that makes mosh pits inevitable, trust me, I was at 2 Doomtree shows this year, I know that for certain, you've got this song. It might appear to be all bragging until you note how many of the off-kilter vibes that seem to have palpable desperation baked into them. All the more aware that what will happen if their bragging can't back up all their bars. And every MC is on fire here. But the two big standouts are Dessa and Sims, the former dropping into triple time as the lightning sparks on her off-kilter car without brakes, and the latter dropping the only reference to Crystal Pepsi you'll hear in hip-hop this year, which is kind of amazing. Well, it appears that all paid off, because Crystal Pepsi is now back, and Doomtree hasn't managed to run into the ground just yet, because this is pure anthemic awesome that puts the line to every ignorant hip-hop act that says bars aren't necessary. They say that, show them this.
We could be gigantic. Everything I need, like it in on Sunday nights. This could be worth the risk, worth the guarantee. This could be the truck that doesn't bite. Just give me a try. Just give me a try.
And yet it appears that reckless desperation is a running theme on this list, because the Wombats brought it in spade with the demented euphoria of this song. Sure, it's not quite as loose as their glory days, but when the lyrics highlight exploding out of a frigid world into a drug-addled frenzy, it's hard not to be dragged around for the ride. It's just that fun. And yeah, it's wild as hell, all panic and rubbery synths bouncing off glittering fragments and a surprisingly prominent bass group, to say nothing of a wild and well-earned guitar solo, but there's something infectious about this coked-out track that stuck with me on those nights where you just want to cut loose. Explosive, riotous, and ridiculously fun, if only for scattered moments. It was destined for this list.
I don't know how we could ever let this transpire. You know I thought this love would always burn like a wildfire. Like a wildfire. Like a wildfire.
And the thing is that there's an explosion on this track too, but it's much more subtle, mostly because Josh Ramsey has been through all this before, and he's shaken to his core to find the girl that broke his heart and called off the wedding is now back in his life, willing to try again. And of course he's gonna be second guessing it and very mistrustful of the situation, not wanting to hope against hope that it's actually true as the muted piano builds off the ebbing waves of guitar and drums, with the strings accenting that swell all the more powerfully. And while I absolutely love Josh Ramsey's heartfelt power all the more here, how raw it sounds, it's the writing that's the star of the song, as his howls of wildfire show just how much he's aware how any reunion between the two would burn and consume them both. And that's why the song hits me? Look, I'll be talking more about Astoria later, but pop music needed a song like this, and it definitely fills its role.
I ain't pageant material. I'm always higher than my hair. And it ain't that I don't care about world peace, but I don't see how I can fix it in a swimsuit on a stage.
You You know, there's a part of me that really wishes all of Kacey Musgraves' album this year had been like this song, but that's only because it's the best possible distillation of combining her brilliantly progressive writing with the traditional country veneer that's subverted at every point. Sure, it lampoons how hyperbolic and ridiculous pageant culture is, but it also doesn't take shots at the girls who do it. The much bigger target seems to be on the culture that endorses it. She's just very much aware that it's not for her. Having grown up in Texas, that was hard to avoid, but she'd rather just bounce off that great kick drum, warm acoustic guitar, and that fantastic swill steel guitar with a great groove, combined with that fantastic balance of strings and guitar melody on the bridge, with Kacey's weary desire just to get drunk and high and not be primped on image over her excellent writing. It feels authentic and cutting the way that her best tracks are, and I can't wait to hear more of them.
Give me something to believe in, yeah. 'Cause I'm looking for something to believe in.
You know, I keep getting the feeling that everybody slept on Fashion's sophomore record, including me initially, and this song in particular, because in the months leading into summer, this was one of my go-to songs, featuring those huge horns and organs against dusty percussion as Fashion and Nas ride off into the momentum of hitting that crossroads of belief and finding one's true path. And what I really love about the song is how it never really passes judgment on finding that path, just that aimless direction is the real killer in a hostile world. And none of these men are shy about hitting to that urgency. There's a real soulful power to this song that I really love. And while part of that was inevitable thanks to Aloe Black's incredible hook and great verse, this might be one of Nas's best verses in years. In other words, if I'm looking for a track that fills me with righteous purpose, it's this one, and you should all check it out.
Are you living the life you chose? Are you living the life that chose you? Are you taking the grown-up dose? Do you live with a man who knows you like I thought I did back then?
But on the flip side, what happens when you encounter someone who does have their life together, where you should have moved on and yet old emotions are resurfacing? Like Mariana's Trench, Jason Isbell gets the complexities behind a similar dynamic, this time as he reconnects with an old ex. And it's the sort of conversation we've all had if we've ever met up with an ex. Pointed conversations and questions that cut more deeply than we ever would want, bragging that feels a little bit hollow about our own achievements, reminiscence of that time we had together that's a little bit awkward, and a hope against logic that something might reignite, even if it's spurred on all the wrong impulses and you know deep down that it will never happen. Again, the writing is by far the star of the show here, and that I absolutely love it. But I'd be remiss not to mention that fantastic melodic hook against the gentle acoustic guitar and the subtle strings beneath the cymbals. Not always the most comfortable of songs to listen to when you really think about it, but for me this year, well, again, we needed a track like this, if only to accent the necessity of actually moving on.
Too many niggas on the block. Too many niggas getting shot. So the piece of man don't stop. Piece of man don't come here no more. Too many niggas getting robbed. These niggas don't wanna stop, but niggas ain't got no job. Blah blah blah. Piece of man don't come here no more. Deliver. Deliver. Yeah. Deliver.
Right from that pummeling bass to the chilling keys, Lupe Fiasco manages something that I've always really admired about his best songs. Taking a concept that might seem kind of mundane and using it to make a far more potent point. In this case, pizza delivery, and how there are certain impoverished inner cities where it's not safe to deliver pizza, depriving them of one of the simplest of pleasures. There's no peace here, and Lupe isn't shy about anchoring his verses in the systemic racism that feeds into this broken system. And then he brings it together with one of the best hooks of his career, as the grime floods out the bottom of the mix as Ty Dolla $ign's mournful tone heralds a chorus of voices mourning a loss that means something so much more than just pizza. And there's even much of an emotional takeaway here for me. It's brilliantly written, brilliantly executed, conceptual hip-hop, and proves that Lupe is finally back on the top of his game.
You can't deny and I can't deny. Open your eyes. I look away and you come around to build your words. High enough to carry you over. I never would have given you up. Never would have given you up. If you only hadn't given me up. Only hadn't given me up and me up to
You know, of all the songs on this list, I'm imagining this is gonna be the one that's the most controversial. I mean, it's the Church's song where Martin Doherty takes the microphone and not Lauren Mayberry. And yet, I stand by the song being the reason why Every Open Eye, their sophomore album, works as well as it does, flipping the script on Mayberry's strident kiss-off anthems to show the other side of the picture. It's mid-80s inspired spikes of glossy synth and a sparse beat that leads to one of my favorite choruses all year. And yeah, it is a little bit dickish as Doherty delivers the same sort of pissy breakup anthem that Mayberry gave earlier on the album, setting up the necessary mirror of context that's the linchpin of the entire album. Hell, maybe it's enough to explain exactly why Mayberry may have been drawn to him in the first place. They got so much in common. And bet beyond just him being a superbly crafted pop song, music isn't always here to indulge our best impulses. And yet when it's properly framed like this, it strikes gold every single time.
You are cast out from the heavens to the ground, blackened feathers falling down. You will wear your independence like a crown.
Okay, maybe it wasn't perhaps the best idea to break to my family that over the Christmas holidays I've been listening to blatantly satanic music all year. But when is this good? Can you blame me? Anchored in a massive rhythm groove with great brittle percussion and fantastic melodic foundation that only gets better off that symphonic hook, Ghost tells the broad strokes of Lucifer's fall and mirrors it to our papal figure, showing just how steep that fall can be when true understanding really creeps around the wings. But really, when the hook is this ridiculously catchy and hammers it with the soaring power that comes with a song that spans heaven and hell, who cares about anything more than that? This song just rocks.
I was riding on my mother's hip. She was shorter than the corn. And all the years I took from her just by being born.
This is arguably one of the most enigmatic songs of Jason Isbell's career, what some might see as a sepia-toned, wistful reminiscence peeling through old photographs anchored by a rebird-touched vocals and gentle acoustic rollick with some great bass work, except there's no real nostalgia here, as Jason Isbell sees the avoidance of teen pregnancy with him in Loveless Marriage as the moment that breaks the cycle for his family. Acknowledgement of looking back, but always eyes fixed on actually going forward, slamming that door in the past with the crack of the kick drums as the violins and guitars flood in for the most glorious instrumental outro outside of a Steven Wilson song. This is progressive country. I never thought I would say that before, but it is. Rooted in fantastic interweaving melodies on guitar and mellotron that never loses its foundation, with phenomenal vintage texture courtesy of Dave Cobb's production that sends a chill down my spine every single time. And if that's not enough, I don't know what is.
Take care to tell it just as it was. Take care to tell me for the boys. I need to feel release. Take care to bury all that you can. Take care to leave a trace of a man.
Hey look, I might have said that Martin Doherty's track is the reason why the album works, but it's not the best song, and Lauren Mayberry reasserts how much of the story is really hers with Leave No Trace, anchored in a ridiculously solid, wiry synth line against a wet, shimmering backdrop with sparse percussion, and a vocal performance that walks that damn near perfect line between having some real vulnerability and being righteously pissed, and the lyrics can back it up, attacking a guy who is hell-bent on trashing her after getting dumped when it was his lack of honesty that led to things going to hell in the first place, and yet, it's well-framed enough to know that neither person is entirely to be blamed in this mess. There is shades of gray here. It's a killer breakup song, easily one of Church's best tracks, and a sign that the mainstream pop, just get on board already. Of course, complicated relationships are not solely the territory of churches, although they do seem to belong to synthpop this year, and the come down from the high on Give Me a Try lives curveballs all the more poignancy as an album closer, where he tries to come down to his normal relationship only to see evidence of her flagrant cheating on him in plain sight, and no matter how hard he tries, he's not about to gloss over it or get over it all that easily. Anchored in a great bass line that's later mirrored in the washed out guitars and cymbals, not even the glitz of the synth can disguise the hollowness creeping through on the song. It's a track that rides on profound profound unease, only for the gut punch moment of quiet on the bridge concludes that shows the inevitable breakup as the backing vocals just fade away. This song was probably the one that grew on me the most this year, and it's not an easy song to really like or get into, and yet, it stuck with me, and I can't deny that.